It's now 5:30, and I want to call the Metropolitan Transit Commission March 22nd meeting to order. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for those that are participating on the Zoom. And I just really am glad to see our Mayor of Gastonia sitting there. And Mr. Reed, good to see you.
Hi, good to be seen.
I know what you mean like that. So anyway, so good evening to those watching on our streaming platforms or on the city's website or channel. We have a very full agenda ahead of us, so I want to get started with our roll call for voting members as well, and then followed by those that are participating in our meeting. So I'll start with Commissioner Altman.
Good afternoon. My name is Lee Altman, County Commissioner serving at large.
I believe Woody Washam is going to be either on Zoom or not, but not physically here today. So Mayor Knox?
Present.
Mayor Bales?
Present.
Mayor Higdon is in Ohio working, and I believe he said that Mayor Pro Tem Garner may be here to represent Matthews. Mayor Simmons?
Present.
Mayor Edwards?
Present.
Where is Mayor Edwards? He's online. All right. And I am Vilau's Mayor of Charlotte. So in addition to this, we have our jurisdictional members here. I want to recognize the city manager of Charlotte. Let me see, I need Mayor, we have Mayor our town manager of Cornelius. No, yes?
He's on.
On?
Present.
Online. I just want to make a note so that we have that. Our Davison town mayor is online as well.
No,
No?
I'm here.
No, did I say mayor or? I am so
Manager.
sorry. This is
okay.
like, it's been a day. So I was really saying your town manager, Mayor.
I don't think.
Okay. Town manager of Huntersville?
I'm here.
Okay. And town manager of Matthews? Town manager of Mint Hill, here. Thank you. Town manager of Pineville? Okay. I think I've covered everyone. Anyone that I've left out or not been able to recognize because we're not doing this. So we'll,
Mayor Washington just joined us.
all right. Where is Mayor? Mayor Washam is online.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Mayor Atkins, these are non-voting members. Mayor Atkins. Mayor Reed is online.
Present.
Marion Holloway. Mr. Tillman, I saw online as well. Is that Mr. Tillman who's?
Present. Yes,
Thank you. Ms. Ashland?
This is Jared Herms, co-chairman of
I know.
TSEC.
And Jared's co-chair.
I know you're the co-chair, but I didn't know if Ms. Ashland was watching online. Where? Right over here. There is present. All right. Mayor Dirch? David Kahn? Wyatt Dunn? John Geddes? The town manager of Mooresville? Is our mayor, or is that not here? All right, and so now we'll go to our committee. Jared, sorry, I saw you already, and you are here representing our CTAG as Mr. Tillman is representing our,
Other way. Jared's representing the.
did I say? You're representing our Citizens Advisory Committee, and Mr. Tillman is representing our function around our budget and those issues. So, Transit Advisory
Madam Chair.
Group. Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Bill Thunberg representing Mooresville.
Okay, Mr. Thornburg representing Okay.
Mooresville.
I'll get better at this. It's just been a long day, and the list is kind of like there.
Well, God be with us all.
I know, thank you. So now that it completes the roll call, is there anyone that I missed? If I haven't missed anyone, I would like to ask for approval of the January 31st, 2023 meeting summary. The minutes are found on pages 5 through 9 in the briefing book. Is there a motion to?
Motion to approve.
Is there a motion and a second? Any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor who
Aye.
are voting members, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, so we had a voice vote on that, and do we have anyone in opposition to the minutes being approved? I have learned that we now have to count opposition just as much as we count the support for things, So first, what I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes as chair to talk about our agenda for the night. This morning, I said that I concurred with our former chair and Commissioner Lee Altman that a comprehensive review of the maintenance and safety at CATS was required. I also said that we need a deeper dive into the management partners review of CATS. Tonight, I think this is when we begin this process. If we're going to do this review, we need to create a scope of services based on the managed project, the management partner review, as well as on the maintenance and safety issues that we have. I believe that anything that we move going forward needs to be approved by the MTC, and contracted will be done by the City of Charlotte. The next step that I believe is important is to have a candid conversation in this room with members that are often sitting here every month hearing these reports and hearing the reaction to the scrutiny of the items that we've been having and really cannot ignore. And so what I'd like to do today is to really rearrange our agenda so that we can receive a report from our interim CAT CEO, any reports that we'd like to hear from our city manager, and then open it up for discussion, because I know that everyone has thoughts and ideas about what we can and should do and how we should act. But at the end of the day, the next step is to make sure that we're moving forward with the issues that we have to incorporate to make sure that CATS has the ability to operate reliably and safely in this community. Transportation services are essential to the way that we live, work, and play. And without those services being there, this community will suffer. Individuals in this community, our residents, will suffer. And so we have to take the real effort to have a forward look to say, how do we do this? So I'm going to begin this process by asking our interim CEO to give us a report regarding the March 21st, 2022 derailment. I'm sorry, May 21st, isn't it? May 21st, 2022 derailment. And I want us to recognize that this is going to be a discussion for everyone, including the members of our committees that help advise us, including those partners that are non-voting members. That we also have a report not only on maintenance and safety, but we have a report that walks us through the management partners' recommendations step by step. I have said that I think it's time for us to consider how do we structure this. I think one of our primary efforts around MTC and the City of Charlotte has got to be examined and looked at in a way that perhaps gets us ready to have an authority that runs this operation so that there's clarity of purpose and authority. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cagle.
Madam Chair, I have a point of order.
Yes.
I was advised by the county attorney that at the beginning of the meeting, in order to take action that is not already on the agenda, we would need a unanimous vote at the beginning of the meeting. And as I do have an action item in the form of voting to appoint an outside transit expert to evaluate these issues, I would like to put that before this.
I agree that we ought to
Before we move
have
forward.
that, and that is an appropriate action. I'd like to have a discussion here from our community leaders as well as members in this room on what we should be trying to accomplish and do. We need a scope of services if we're going to have something, and that scope of services, because MTC is a policy board, should include the conversations that we have and set out as our determinations for that kind of review and scope.
I
So
understand.
I hope that we can do that, and we can have your motion after we hear from the report, and we can gather our thoughts around each of these issues.
I defer to the MTC attorney. He advised me that we had to queue up the ability to even vote later at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, so our MTC rules of procedure provide for that if we don't have an item on the agenda, but we wish to take action on that item for tonight's meeting, that we will need to, in order to make it an action item, we will need to take a vote, and that vote will be unanimous in order for it to appear as an action item then for our discussion. So as long as that is done before the discussion happens,
Okay.
we can
We can do that before the discussion, after we have our staff reports. I think the other thing that I really would like to see is that we have, out of our membership of 7, 4, and those that are on, 5 and 6. I really would like to see Matthews participate in this discussion and any other folks that have an opportunity to think about it. So I agree that we can have the discussion, but I want us to make sure in some way we include in that discussion the opportunity for others to be able to participate either by email or comments, however we need to do that, so that we don't miss anyone. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start with Mr. Cagle.
Yes, ma'am. So I will, Paulus, can you pull up the management partners presentation? Yes, so let me move to the microphone here. So this presentation, Mr. Jones will start off with some brief information, and then Ms. Babson, Assistant City Manager Babson, will talk about management partners, and then I will move into first 90 to 120 days, a report out on the first 90 days of my interim CEO assignment.
Okay. So, thanks, Brent. And so I guess I would say Madam Chairman as opposed to Madam Mayor. So, thank you. So before I turn it over to Liz, I do want to, I guess, talk a little bit about how we came about with the Management Partners report. And a lot of words have been shared today in terms of responsibility and accountability. And I will tell you, as the city manager of the city of Charlotte, what we call Team Charlotte, we have about 8,000 employees. We have departments that are, as offices that are few as a dozen employees. And some departments, like police, where we have almost 2,000 employees. We have departments that are regional in nature, like Charlotte Water, as well as the aviation department. And we have a strong record of operations, whether it's CMPD, or fire, or solid waste services, or CDOT. But sometimes our departments need an outside assessment, and sometimes there are issues. Those issues, whether it's in communication or operations or leadership, and so we welcome those reviews. Last year, as CATS was going through many challenges, we did a couple of things. One, we created an internal team, which Liz Babson, as an assistant city manager, really spearheaded it. And we also had Brent Cagle, an ACM, as well as Jason Snyder and Sarah Hazel, try to see what are some of the things that were happening with CATS and some of the deficiencies that we were seeing. And then we actually brought in, or I called in, the external review of management partners. And what Brent will talk to you tonight about, as well as Liz, is some of the things that were found in that report, including questions about leadership, management, culture. And I will tell you that since that report has been released, I would call it the C-suite of CATS, is totally different. In other words, the CEO, the CFO, and the COO are no longer part of CATS. And some of those issues are personnel, which we don't discuss. But what I will tell you, it's an opportunity to take a look at the management partners' report and see how we can build on this. Brent and I are committed to making sure that there's also an outside assessment as it relates to assets that are a part of CATS. And what I do know is that Brent is willing, able, and ready to communicate with what is happening and really build back trust. So just wanted to try to focus this on how we got here with the management partners report and some of the information that we have that we're trying to build on now. So I'll turn it over to you, Liz.
Thank you. And again, Liz Babson, Assistant City Manager with the City of Charlotte. Happy to be here this evening with you, Madam Mayor, Madam Chair, and MTC members. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. As City Manager Marcus Jones just mentioned, we engaged management partners back last year, and that was really following a July 16th memo that he wrote to City Council and the Mayor acknowledging that we were seeing some operational challenges in CATS at that time. It was resulting from many of the things that we're seeing across the country in the way of labor shortages, employee morale. There were some safety concerns many of us were familiar with and hearing about in the media. And all of these were really impacting our reliability of service and our ability to provide that reliable service to the community. So the memo laid out a number of things you see here on the screen, some short-term improvements, but also identified some longer-term needs. And again, it's important to understand that all of these things work together in a comprehensive way to really help assess the operation of the organization of CATS as a department. And the manager committed to immediately evaluating current practices, looking for opportunities to ensure a safe environment for our bus operators and CATS employees. Brent will talk a little bit more about that as he goes through the work that he's done in the first 90 days in his role as the interim CATS CEO. Last year, City Council adopted a really aggressive compensation plan that was designed to increase retention and recruitment, and we're seeing some vacancy trends starting to shift across the organization and within CATS at this time as a result of those changes. And then finally, as we've talked about, we engaged management partners as an outside agency to really come in and take a look and do an organizational review and assessment of CATS. This was a high-level review, so I'll talk about over the next couple of slides some of that information and the way in which we collected information in working with the consultant. So again, that review would assess organizational structure and leadership. It would look specifically at procurement and contract oversight, employee morale, contract relationship with our current contract provider for bus operations, and service provision and bus reliability. So Council and MTC received that assessment late last year. And again, it was a high-level roadmap that really identified ways in which we could start to look at improving the organization. But it also serves as a long-term action plan for us. Next slide, please. And talk a little bit about the process that they went through, management partners, to collect and assess the current operations within CATS. They conducted a number of interviews with city employees and also with our contractor serving bus operations, RAPDEV management. They reviewed tons of documents, including budgets, audit performance reviews, strategic plans, customer service satisfaction reviews. They also surveyed all of the City of Charlotte CATS employees and conducted a limited review of other transit agencies across the country. Next slide, please. And so again, this was a high-level overview, but just the start of a much more comprehensive process that we're going to undertake. And you'll hear some about some of the work that Brent is doing today as we speak, and then you'll hear more about some of the next steps and actions that we want to take. Out of that management partners assessment was a roadmap with objectives, and those are the ones you see listed on the screen. It was a collaborative team with shared mission and values, an organizational culture that encourages transparency and staff retention, clear expectations and accountability throughout the organization, clarified roles and responsibilities related to those contracted services, because there was confusion within the organization about how that occurred. And then a governance structure that's accountable and transparent to the community that it serves. And with that, I will turn it over to Brent Cagle, who again is our interim CAT CEO, and he'll talk more specifically, and you'll start to see a theme of some of the management partners' work and some of the changes that CATS is making as we speak.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, members of the MTC. Next slide. So I always want to start off with some of the things that I think we've done well, some of the things that I learned that I'm proud of or encouraged by. Early successes. One thing, when I first started, the first 2 to 3 weeks, I spent a lot of time out in the field, across all units, across all shifts, talking to employees. And I was really encouraged by those conversations. They shared with me challenges, and they shared with me concerns, things that they see around the workplace that we can work on, that we can get better on. But one thing that they all said is they have a strong sense of pride working for CATS. That's good. They're proud of the work they do. They want to provide excellent services to the community, to all of our citizens, and they understand how important CATS is to the entire region and keeping people moving across the region for mobility. So I think that's good. They're committed to working together to make CATS great, to make it a great organization. And that's the foundation. Every great organization really starts with employees. The other thing I'll say is we have started to stabilize bus and rail operations. In January, our missed trips were less than 1%. Now, February numbers, they started to creep up a little bit. They're in the 1% to 2% range. But again, that is a significant improvement from where we were in the summer of 22, when we were seeing 8 to 9% missed trips monthly. We've stabilized that. Rail operations remains consistent with 20-minute headways and 15-minute peak hour headways. And because I think we all know where this presentation is headed, I will go ahead and add in here the issues that we have related to operating restrictions have not changed the schedule for rail. The rail schedule remains the same, even with the operating restrictions. 20-minute headways plus 15-minute peak hour headways Monday through Friday, 2 hours beginning of the day, 2 hours end of the day. And then we also flex for special events to 15-minute headways, things like Charlotte FC or other large events uptown. That schedule has remained. It is unimpacted by the operating restrictions. Now, the question might be, and I ask this question because I'm simple sometimes, I don't get it. I said, how can we, if the trains are going 35 miles an hour when they used to go around 40 to 45, how can that be? So the answer to that, without trying to get into the details, is if you were to get on the Blue Line today and ride from one end to the other, because that train that you're on is traveling slightly slower than it was before, it would take longer. The total amount of time increase is between 2 to 5 minutes, depending on some variables like how long each car dwells at each station. When you look at it on short, and not a lot of people actually ride end to end on a routine basis, but if you look at it station to station, then it can vary from no change to a little bit more, depending on how far apart each station it is. But the headways have remained unchanged, and the total travel time end to end has increased in the 2 to 5 minute range on the Blue Line. All right, so no, we've cleared the air on that one. I will also say I think that it was very good news that the new collective bargaining agreement is in place for our bus operators. It is in place, and an operator strike was avoided, and the bus operators were able to, or are able in their new collective bargaining agreement to enjoy enhanced pay and benefits associated with that agreement. The bus operations contract will be issued this month. It is in its final prep stages, and we will be issuing that contract for RFP this month. The current bus operations contract with RATP Dev expires in February of 2024. So we will be issuing the RFP, seeking proposals, and then making determinations. And if it's a different contractor than it is today, working with the current contractor and the new contractor to create a transition plan so that it is seamless and our customers are not impacted by the changeover in the provider. And then we're focusing on daily operations. It's always our first priority to be safe and reliable in service. The last point I'll make here, and Mr. Howell is going to talk about this in the next presentation, our budget is stable and we're meeting our financial targets. Chad Howell is finalizing the collaborative budget. I'm intentional to put that in there because one of the things that management partners talked about was a lack of understanding amongst internal CAT staff about how budget decisions were made, right? And what that really means is if you are in a division and you have needs every year and you put those requests forward to the CFO as part of the budget process, they frequently were not informed as to how those decisions would be made, whether or not they were funded or not. They found out on July 1st when the budget was approved. That's not a great way to run a budget process. And we are, Chad is actually, if I've been with CATS 110 days, I think, Chad has been with CATS 108 days. So he took on a pretty large challenge, but he's really been trying to change that culture and create a collaborative budgeting process. The other thing, and you'll see more of this, is our focus. I think it's important in a budget to really define what your priorities are. For me, my priorities are employees, retention and recruitment, and career development and training with our employees, safety and security, a focus on training for our operators, especially de-escalation and customer service training, and additional security resources. We know we need additional security resources to support our operators. We also know the best way to keep our operators safe is for them to have the tools and the ability to de-escalate. And so we need to invest heavier in those de-escalation trainings. And then asset preservation, additional investments in rail and bus fleets and facilities. Next slide. Continue to work, better communication. We can always be better in how we communicate. We need to break down silos and create a shared mission and vision across the entire organization. And as I said before, provide better communications around the budget process. Secondly, we must start to spend on asset management. We need to continue to have an aggressive bus replacement program. We have a fair amount of our bus fleet is over the specified FTA useful life of 12 years. Approximately 30% of our fleet is over that age. Even more concerning, and that's around 100 buses. So our fleet is around 300 buses. So about a third of it is over the 12-year useful life. So about 100 buses. More concerning to me is that of those 100, there are a fair amount of those, 60 or 70%, that are over 15 years of age. That is concerning. When we order buses, it takes 18 to 24 months to receive buses. So we know now we're behind, and to get out of that, we're going to have to be very aggressive, not just in the current year, but probably for 3 to 5 years as we buy, so that we can lower the average age of our fleet and bring our our fleet back into, a better cycle for age of the fleet. The other thing that we see is we must immediately implement rail fleet major maintenance programs and enter into service agreements to ensure the fleet is properly maintained. We need to conduct a full facility assessment, conduct major facility rehabilitation on CATS buildings, and prioritize the immediate hiring of an asset manager for CATS. CATS has a transit asset management plan. When we completed that plan, it was always our intention to hire an asset manager. Unfortunately, that position has remained unfilled or unfunded. That will be a priority for this budget year immediately, before actually the beginning of next year. We will put it in the next year's budget, but we will be looking to fill that position immediately. And we need to have a 5-year financial plan to meet our upcoming operation needs. We're projecting increasing operating expenditures over the next 5 years to address the aging bus fleet, to address deferred maintenance. And we still have additional safety and security program needs that must be funded. And we need to develop enhanced employee training programs and focus on employee retention and recruitment. So we know that we have some challenges. The good news is we are financially stable. We have the resources to address these deferred maintenance items and to enable us to grow our operating budget to meet our current needs. Next slide. So over the next 30 days, we're issuing the bus RFP, the bus operations provider RSP. We're submitting the budget to the MTC and City Council for consideration. On April 10th, at the council business meeting, we will have several RCAs, but one of the requests for council action, I apologize, we'll have several requests for council actions, but one of those will be to amend a contract with Siemens to enhance and expedite necessary rail car maintenance, and to purchase from Siemens a piece of equipment which is called a dolly. And think about a dolly like you would a furniture dolly, a set of wheels that you can use to roll things around. So in rail, a light rail dolly is a set of wheels that you place the vehicle on when you need to remove the permanent vehicle wheels. And those are referred to as a truck. And the truck is in effect a wheel set. There are 3 trucks per vehicle. And so when you remove those for maintenance, you need a set of dollies to place the vehicle on. And so we will be asking council to consider the amended contract for the maintenance, but also the purchase of 6 dolly sets, which allows us to work with Siemens to expedite the maintenance. So I'll pause there and say the maintenance that we're talking about, obviously the community has been talking about this, and so the maintenance we're talking about is the truck overhaul maintenance. The truck overhaul maintenance contract, we entered into the contract about 2 years ago. There's 1 year of Siemens to prepare for, to set up their shop in the way that's necessary to actually do the truck maintenance for our vehicles. The first 2 vehicle trucks went to Siemens about 12 months ago, and the first one of those was received back to Charlotte, to CATS, about 3 weeks ago, and the second is on its way back. Now, when the trucks are received, the first one and the second one after it, we will have to do acceptance testing. And I want to point out that the maintenance on these trucks is very specialized. And so as they do acceptance testing, it's possible, the first set of trucks has not been accepted yet. It's possible that other issues will arise as they're doing acceptance testing, and you have to make additional repairs there on site. Not sending the trucks back to California, but on site before they're able to be accepted and put back into the fleet. So the first two trucks are out on their way back. The contract we have was for half of the fleet, 20 vehicles. And because we were going to be sending the trucks one set at a time, was going to, the projected completion date for half the fleet was July 2025. So that's a long time. Given the situation we are in today, we have been working with NCDOT and with Siemens to expedite that. So what that means is we will, now that we have additional dolly sets, we will send more trucks at a time to Siemens for them to complete the repairs. They are working on a new schedule. So we're buying 6 sets of dollies. We have 1 set, so that's a 7th, and we are working with a different transit agency, a separate transit agency, to borrow an additional set, and we should be able to send 8 sets of trucks at one time so that we can greatly increase the speed of the repairs, and we are extending the contract for the entire fleet. So the original contract, half the fleet, July 2025, based on the assumption that 1 truck set at a time would go to Siemens. The amended contract is 8 truck sets at a time, entire fleet, and we are awaiting a new schedule. But given that we are sending 8 times more trucks at a time, we expect a greatly expedited schedule. As soon as we have that, we will report that out.
I'm sorry.
It's an
All
Amber
of us
Alert.
have those.
Yeah, we will report that out. So I expect the schedule to be greatly reduced. In fact, I believe that it will take many months to do this work. It is very detailed work. All of the work has to be done in California. But we do expect a much better schedule as far as speed because we are sending more trucks at a time. So let me pause there and say that is where we're at. But all of this is predicated around the notice that we received from NCDOT. So let me back up. North Carolina Department of Transportation has oversight responsibility for safety matters when it comes to rail and light rail. So they are the designated agency by the FTA. And so where this came to, where I became aware of this was on February 6th. North Carolina Department of Transportation sent me a notice that they were concerned that we had not properly addressed the bearings in the trucks. Each truck has a main axle bearing, and that axle bearing failed on May 21st, 2022, when we had the vehicle derailment that evening. And so after the derailment occurred, we immediately notified NCDOT, as is the regulation, and we began working with Siemens to do a root cause analysis to understand exactly what happened and why. As the root cause analysis was completed, there were many factors, contributing factors that led to the situation. One of those factors, so a couple of those factors would have been operator and communications center actions, right? There is some indication that the operator and the communications center, they did not know exactly what the issue was with the rail car, but they knew it was not operating quite as they would expect, normal. But that did not lead them to immediately requesting that the rail car be taken out of service. So it remained in service, and ultimately the final contributing factor, or the other contributing factor, was the failure of the main axle bearing. In the axle bearing, it was found, the seal, it's a sealed bearing. Water entered, the seal broke, water entered into the bearing, and that created corrosion. Corrosion over time led the bearing to heat the axle. The axle overheated and seized or stopped turning, and therefore the wheel stopped turning, and that is on the middle truck set of the vehicle that derailed. Now, at the time, the vehicle was in revenue service. The vehicle came to a stop, and the 24 passengers were safely unloaded and taken on to their destinations. And one passenger called for medical evaluation, but was released on scene with no treatment. So everyone was okay. But after it, so that was the evening. After that, we started working with NCDOT, notifying them and the FTA, and working with Siemens to do the root cause analysis. As Siemens did the root cause analysis, they determined that the bearing, that there was a flaw with the bearing that needed to, the real fix for the bearing was to do the truck overhaul. The way that we resolve the issue with the bearing is to complete the truck overhaul as quickly as possible. It was also determined that CATS is overdue on the recommended maintenance schedule of the truck overhaul. Trucks should be overhauled at 300,000-mile intervals or 5 years, whichever, the first of each. And for CATS, we will get to the 300,000-mile interval first, always. So we have a significant number of vehicles, let's just say most, if not all of the vehicles, are overdue either for their 300,000-mile overhaul or their 600,000-mile overhaul. So we also determined that, and NCDOT was concerned, and they asked us to provide them a corrective action plan, which we did. We went back and forth with NCDOT as we created the corrective action plan, but ultimately our corrective action plan was agreed to on March 2nd. And all of the things that I've described to you, expediting the contract and those things, are part of the corrective action plan and feed into the corrective action plan, as well as the speed restriction on the blue line. Under normal operations, the blue line on average has an average travel speed of about 40 to 45 miles an hour. It has maximum speeds of about 55 miles an hour, but those are very short periods along very specific areas of the line. The speed restriction is 35 miles an hour maximum speed across the entire line. So that is the first restriction. And each of these restrictions sort of plays into the other. The second restriction is that we will take 8 rail vehicles out of service, or blue tag them is what we call it. We will tag 8 vehicles out of service, and generally speaking, those are going to be, will be the highest mileage vehicles, and they're out of service. Now, that also coincides with sending 8 vehicle trucks, sets of trucks, to Siemens at a time, because as we're sending those trucks, those vehicles come out of service awaiting the trucks to come back. And then the last piece to this is, and again, it goes together with the others, while we did not need to reduce service, right, we can maintain the 20-minute headways plus 15 on peaks. Given the other parameters we have, service, increasing service, we cannot increase service until we have the fleet repaired. And so again, all of this is coming together, and as it's been noted, I became aware of this situation on 2/6 when the NCDOT provided me the letter, sent the letter. And then leading into 2/17, and the subsequent letter from DOT, started to understand and realize that that cats needed a different approach, and that the lack or the overdue maintenance is really the fundamental issue here that has to be addressed, and that cats, once we get it addressed, we will never find ourselves in this situation again. It must be addressed immediately, and ongoing, we cannot find ourselves in this situation again.
Mr. Jones, do you have anything further to say? As I said, these are difficult things to hear. When we have had or sat around this table for a long time, listening to each other and talking about issues that weren't related to this kind of report that Brent just gave to us, it is going to take us the time and the effort to get this done, but we will get it done. This is a commitment that we have to have if we're going to have a system that operates this way. So with that, I think we've heard from any other thing that you want to recommend. So I wanted to take a moment and just say that this is the time, I think it's a great opportunity for us to have further questions, deeper dive into any of this that we choose to. And I'm going to ask that everyone be present. So I'd really like to have our advisory group chair and vice chairs participate in this discussion. So because you have long-term experience with us and we want to know what's going on. And so when we talk about this, glad to have them, Mr. Tillman and Mr. Hums around the table with us. I'm glad to recommend that. Please join us. And then I think that we really want to start an open discussion. Questions we want the questions, and we also would like to have, at the end of this conversation, an idea of what the scope of efforts that we have to make this complete for both management partners as well as safety and maintenance. So I do want to say that all of you should have, if you are watching this online, all of the documents that have been referenced are on the website that you can look at. You've got a number of reports that are part of this. So with that, how would we like to start? Who would like to be recognized? Mr. Hums, would you like to? So you usually start us off. Oh, I'm sorry, we have a public speaker. I am forgetting that. Mr. Moore, you spoke with us last month. Please join us and speak with us tonight, and would love to hear any comments that you have respective of this.
Thank you all for being here again tonight. Thank you, Mayor Lyles. Thank you, Mr. Cagle, for being here. So we've talked a lot about trust tonight, which is very on topic with what I was coming to talk about. Now, I do want to start off just by saying, Mr. Cagle and everyone else who has started with CATS fairly recently, I do appreciate the work you've done. Obviously, you've done a lot of work to build trust with drivers recently, and to be here and actually be present and have these conversations, and I do appreciate that. So the light rail cuts that were just mentioned aside, because we do have an explanation for why that would not be able to be restored. We were talking a lot about the cuts that happened back in August that were essentially presented originally as temporary cuts that were only cuts to provide reliability over the process of hiring more drivers. Now, I also had attended the recent TSAC meeting where, it became somewhat clear that a lot of the initial hiring numbers that were being given to RATP Dev were hiring for the current reduced service, and that there was no current plan on how to restore the service that was cut in August that was originally presented as very temporary. Now, I understand there's a lot of factors that go into this. I'm not trying to come up, but this affects trust. When we're talking about ridership trust and whether people can feel like they can trust CATS to do what they need to do to be able to come back and give the ridership and things like that. But it especially affects trust because we are currently at a time where we are effectively depending on, one, the state to trust us to put the tax on the ballot to be able to do plans like Envision My Ride or the Silver Line or anything that would be happening going forward, and where people have to vote for that tax. Effectively, you are asking the public to have this vote where they pretty much would have to approve it in order for any of these plans to go into place. And I think we have to kind of recognize that it is hard to expect people to trust CATS to successfully pull that off when we cannot pull off what we were doing before that is far below what would be projected with any of the plans that we're trying to do. It's sort of the analogy I think of like a parent talking to their kid. Like if a kid's like, Mom, can I get a new dog? Like, I promise I will take really good care of it. Here's the plan of everything I'm gonna do to take care of it. And you look at the kid and you see the cat next to him that's dead. And you're like, you're gonna have to do some more work for me to trust you with the dog. And I think to an extent, even though I know the work is being done, I think that's sort of where we're at right now. And I think, you know, the big place to start rebuilding that trust would be kind of to at least kind of have a clear plan of like, this is what we are working on to achieve, at the very least, just like the original frequencies on all major lines. Like if that, like it doesn't have, I know it's not gonna happen overnight, but it's also the type of thing that's never gonna happen if it's just wishful thinking. Like there has to be a plan. And I think that's what I personally, as a writer, daily writer, would like to see more of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. We greatly appreciate your voice and your message to us. We are going to continue to work at it, and plans are great, but action's a lot better. So I think you're going to continue to see this effort where we're talking about maintenance and safety to get to a place that we can do something a little bit more realistic for what the riders have expected or experienced. So thank you. I would like to start off with our Transit Service Advisory, and we'll start with the Vice Chair. Comments, suggestions, ideas? What are you thinking about?
So thank you, Madam Mayor, and I also like to thank Interim Castillo, Brent Cagle, for stepping into this role, because I know there is a lot, you have a lot to do. But well, I'll kind of start off and I'll kind of tee up as far as discussion for a lot of our voting members is that many of us on the TSAC committee were very thrown off by this. I know for me, I will just be honest, I was very pissed. And this is also coming from at the heels of we recently had a safety presentation, which we had talked about a lot of things, including what makes a preventable versus non-preventable collisions, and a lot of our stats, which were very much appreciated. However, the one big thing that was missing is the existence of a derailment. So, as you can probably imagine, coming at the heels of that presentation, hearing this news was very much had many of us taken aback by this. And with this, there is very much a loss of public trust because of this, and there is going to be a lot of work. And I do appreciate you presenting the work that's going to have to be done. Over the past year, as I've been on TSAC, I have made quite a few comments, either comments or questions in regards to the maintenance of our vehicles, both rail and bus, because while maintenance is not, I've said it many times, maintenance is not sexy. Trust me, I understand, but it's imperative and arguably one of the most important things for the running of an effective transit system, especially one as large as CATS. So already that in itself is one of the tip of the iceberg as far as the loss of trust. And then so obviously much of this needs to be done now, because as she's done now and have ways to be able to expedite things, which I have seen, which is good. But other things that do need to be considered, including things such as be able to better work with safety teams of all of our government agencies, such as FTA, NCDOT, and things like that. Such as, I know we are doing the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, but based on many of the documents, it has shown that they had suggested it, and originally the idea was not received as well. So better communication and better kind of adherence to what the safety professionals for government agencies is very important. And as well as there definitely needs to be an overhaul and a real consideration as far as ROCC operations, because during the, because during the such event that did happen in May of 2022, there was the evidence that the rail operator has expressed concerns, and much of it was seen as kind of a, well, no, need to look here or just turn it on or off again, which is utterly unacceptable. So again, I am not criticizing the actual operator of the vehicle because what they are doing did seem like the right thing, but definitely a close look at the operation of your rail operations center is extremely vital, amongst a number of other things. And then last but not least, I will just also state that obviously what is happening on the rail needs to be done. We all know this, and also as well as the processing when it comes to avoiding deferred maintenance in the future for both our rail and our bus as well. As a regular rider of the 9 and 17, I will say is our fleet is very much aging. There is a lifespan for reasons so there definitely needs to be a very aggressive approach from not just now replacing the already old buses, but also in the future with making sure that this does not happen again, because there are many riders or potential riders who are worried about buses as well. So,
All right, thank you. Ms. Ashland?
Oops. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the point I'd like to raise is, so I've been chair of TSAC since 2020. So I was sitting in the same chair in February 2020 when a motion was brought, I think, before MTC to fund the midlife overhauls that are being discussed now 3 years later that still haven't been done. You can go back and look at the minutes. They're on the MTC website. So I know COVID obviously happened in that time, and it's easy to say, like, everything went to hell because of COVID, but why have we not talked about that since then? 3 years later, those overhauls weren't done. It doesn't seem like anyone remembered that those didn't get done. Why wasn't that brought up like all the time, instead of just, oh yeah, we have to do that, and there was a derailment that maybe could have been prevented if those overhauls had been done. I kind of want to reflect on the comment from our public speaker, and also I listened to Mayor Lyles on Charlotte Talks today. I know it's important to go forward with things being fixed, and looking forward is how we fix things, but I think that to gain trust, you have to look back and fix the things that happened and have some sort of accountability. So if those overhauls were supposed to be done 3 years ago, there needs to be, like, why didn't they happen? Was the money budgeted? If it was and didn't get spent, like, what happened to it? And if it wasn't budgeted, when was that decision made? Why hasn't been the midlife overhauls, why haven't they been brought up like every month? It wasn't a secret that they needed to be done 3 years ago. Why is it 3 years before we talked about it again? So I just think that going forward, it's important to fix things, but that also requires looking back and making sure people are held accountable for decisions that were made.
I want to say to you that I agree with you. We have to look back at the process, but a lot of this is what I talked about with culture. If you don't have people that are willing to speak up and people that feel that perhaps they are not in an appropriate place to speak up, and I've said it, the most important thing in an organization is to have your truth teller with you. And I don't think that we had that in CATS. And I don't know why. There's no way that I can go back, and I guess what I should have said, and I'm not the most articulate mayor, but believe me, my heart is in the right place. My head may not follow me, but what I'm trying to say is that if you have employees that don't feel comfortable, we can probably go back, but it's going to be, how do we make it sure that they feel comfortable enough to say, I want to step up and say, this is some way to improve this. This is why I didn't do or didn't say what I wanted to say. And incorporate that into the respect that we have for the people that work for us. And so I agree with you, and I don't believe it is about money. Money doesn't cause this level of concern. And even if it did, that would have been a part of what I would say the culture is. And now I'm going to stop and let Mr. Cagle give you the real answers of this. But I want you to know that, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is I will agree with the mayor. I think you did a good job. This is not a money issue. CATS has financial reserves. We still have COVID, quote unquote COVID funds of the different sorts. These repairs are expensive. They're capital maintenance, and they are expensive, but this is not a money issue. This is a culture issue. What I will say is I agree with you. Accountability is absolutely key. What I have to determine, and what I am determining now, is where do I need to hold people accountable versus where are the people who were afraid to speak up. And I need the folks who are afraid to speak up to understand we need that. We need people. I need people. No one in CATS should ever worry about coming to my office and letting me know if there's an issue. And I said that in the town halls. I'll be doing new town halls to reiterate that, because one set of town halls isn't enough. But I've seen that, right? We're going to get better, but I've already seen employees who call me. I give employees my cell phone number, right? Because if they have an issue, I need to know about it. Or come to the office, or I go to them in the town halls. So culture doesn't change overnight, but it will change quickly, because a culture of silence, there are a lot of people who have been waiting for this, waiting for doing this. So I have to decide, and I am working through this, where are the folks that I need to hold accountable, and where are the folks that I need to be listening to as they start to emerge and want to help CATS be great. But both are appropriate, and I will be looking at both.
I think that, as I said, this is something that we're committed to. This organization, every member of this group understands this. We sent out all of this packet of information. You should have it, and have it available to you to talk about these things, and being available in a way that's substantive and not just a report. And that's one of our commitments.
One thing I would like to clarify just as we go through this, and I think there has been confusion, and believe me, this is complicated, and so it's understandable. You mentioned what we refer to as the midlife overhaul. And so I do want to be clear, for rail vehicles, transit agencies frequently do what's called a midlife overhaul, and is exactly what it sounds like. At the middle of the life, 15 years in, they send the car, the entire car, back to the manufacturer, and they rebuild it ground up. And that includes mechanical maintenance. It also includes passenger conveniences, new seats, new audio video systems, Wi-Fi on board, all of those things that weren't available 15 years ago that the transit agency wants to include now. And so it's a full rebuild. It's a midlife overhaul. If you went to Siemens and said, show me the big book of manufacturer recommended maintenance, show me midlife overhaul, it doesn't exist. That's a transit agency term for a complete refresh or rebuild of a rail vehicle. Now, components that are included in midlife overhauls, they absolutely could show you the OEM manufacturer recommended maintenance. Truck maintenance, truck overhaul is a manufacturer recommended maintenance that should be completed at 300,000 miles, every 300,000 miles, as I mentioned. So I don't want to confuse, I hope that helps us not confuse. We need to do the midlife overhaul. It has been planned for several years. It has not been started. Right now, it's estimated at $40 to $50 million, but we need to put that out for proposals, and that is important. $40 to $50 million for half of the fleet. Our fleet consists of kind of two eras of cars: the original cars, and then the cars that were bought with the Blue Line extension. We We have 42 vehicles, light rail vehicles. 20 of them are original and need a midlife overhaul. 22 are from the Blue Line extension, and they have, they're not quite the midlife overhaul. But by the time we get done with the first set of vehicles, they will need midlife overhaul. But what we're talking about specifically with the bearing issue is about the truck overhauls. And so while we know we need to do the midlife overhaul, right now, frankly, we are prioritizing the truck overhaul to fix the deficient bearing. I did not mention before, but I will now. The estimated cost for the fleet for truck overhaul is approximately $30 million. And again, that action will be going to council on April 10th. But that $30 million all in for the fleet is completely separate and apart from the midlife overhaul.
But would the midlife overhaul have rebuilt the trucks?
It would have, but so 2 years ago, when we said we would start, when CAT said they would start the midlife overhaul, it's sort of I don't know how to explain it. Even back then, we needed to do the truck overhaul. And I don't know if the thinking was because the truck overhaul is included in the midlife overhaul. Well, I can't say what that thinking was, but they are separate things. A midlife overhaul would include a truck overhaul, but it takes much more time. The first vehicle, when we send the first vehicle out for midlife overhaul, it could take 18 to 24 months for just one vehicle because it's so extensive.
Right, but I mean, the end result, though, is that if the midlife overhauls had been done in a timely manner, it would have gotten the truck overhauls, and it would have ultimately taken less money and time instead of doing them
No.
separately.
No, I don't think that's correct. The truck overhauls need to be done regardless of the midlife overhaul. And we should have been doing those and planning for the midlife overhaul so that they were coordinated together. Not that we find ourselves where we have to put all efforts to the truck, but they would be separate and independent, and you would need to do them regardless. Because the truck overhaul is routine. Every 3 years, each rail car at CATS travels about 100,000 miles a year, normal schedules, normal routines. So every 3 years, we're doing truck overhauls. So doing a midlife would not have prevented us from doing a truck overhaul. We would still need to be doing that. We just should have planned better to coordinate those and do them, in conjunction.
And implemented it as well. It didn't
Correct.
just planning, it should have been implementation.
Correct.
All right, so I know, now I want to go to members of the MTC. I'd like to,
Madam Chair,
who?
this is Edward Tillman from CTAG.
Okay, oh, that's right, let's go to our CTAG. Mr. Tillman, and then we'll come to our members of the MTC. Mr. Tillman?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and CTAG members. I'll be brief with my comments. The first thing I'd like to say is I believe to some degree what we are now being made aware of in some ways stems from somewhat of an adversarial relationship that previous leadership had with the, I would say, public in some respects, as well as the media, and trying to avoid additional negative press or attention. And I certainly, in many meetings, heard and felt a very specific tone in how things were being portrayed at CATS and trying to downplay those things. And I certainly feel that that may have played a significant role in how we got here. But moving forward, because we cannot change what's already occurred, the trust that the community has with CATS was low already, and this is not helping at all. And it's going to cost us more than what we have already spent and what we are going to have to spend to regain that credibility. And potentially, there's got to be an adjustment to that, and in some ways going further than we expect to go in creating a trust but verify system. And I'm not big on creating check boxes or creating new processes, but potentially a checks and balances system is necessary so that one individual, two individuals, whatever the case may be, don't have the ability to downplay or say hide or mislead what the truth is about what is going on. And similar to what we have and most communities have regarding police actions involving shootings or things that seem out of the norm, there may be a need to consider something to the same effect when there is an action that involves some sort of incident regarding bus riders, bus drivers, CATs, the rail riders and drivers, so that anything that has to be reported to the DOT also gets sent to outside entities so that they are made aware and we are not coming behind our own leadership who should be sharing this so that we can get better, making sure someone else sees this and we are all working in the light of day instead of hiding it until some other time where we can move beyond it or change the narrative in some manner. It is very disturbing where we are, but we can move forward, but there will need to be some recreation of trust within the community to say we are opening the doors to all of this, such as Mr. Cagle talked about the budget with the internal partners. Now, we need to do the same when it comes to all aspects that are truly public information and necessary for the public to be made aware of. Because otherwise, we're creating a system, a regional system, that one of the biggest populaces will refuse to consistently go to. It will continue to be a choice of last resort or the choice of the poor instead of the choice of everyone looking to be green, to be efficient, to be more of a community. Those are my thoughts as we sit here and sort of play armchair quarterback and see what has occurred over the last 10 to 12 months.
Mr. Tillman, I think that you captured it very well, and so thank you for the comments. They certainly are appropriate for this discussion, so thank you.
Thank you.
So now I want to recognize Commissioner Altman.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by recognizing that Mr. Cagle is trying to explain events and actions which almost entirely predate him. And I recognize the difficult position that puts you in, and I appreciate your willingness to step in, truly. I have some comments to make. I have questions peppered throughout. If I may burden you to keep a running tally of my questions, and at the end, if you could respond. Thank you. And, you know, in the last day, I've heard a couple issues raised that I would like to address. One, the need for a transit authority, and a big presentation tonight about management partners and their comments regarding our governance structure. The need for a transit authority is a great conversation to have. In fact, I'll be meeting with area mayors about this on Friday. But the need for a transit authority has nothing to do with CATS's failure to perform the required maintenance on these trains and the fact that no one sounded an alarm. The need for a transit authority has nothing to do with CATS's failure to disclose the derailment. The need for a transit authority does not help us address how we will ensure these trains are safe and how we will hold accountable those who fail to do their job. I've also heard it raised that the governing structure of CATS is in some shape or form an apparent explanation for how these failures occurred. But there's no ambiguity that CATS is a public enterprise of the City of Charlotte. There's no ambiguity that CATS's CEO directly reports to the city manager or his ACM. It cannot be said that anyone at CATS was unclear who they should report to and that this is the reason that all of these lapses occurred. Last, whatever problems of the governance structure, and they do exist, Getting it changed will be a heavy lift requiring the General Assembly approval, and we cannot afford to wait around for that. So I hope we don't confuse those issues in these discussions. The need of a transit authority and addressing the governance structure are very important, but they are at best distantly related to our topic tonight. I say this as someone who was the former lead attorney for the state of Georgia's Consumer Protection Agency for 5 years. I am very uncomfortable that prior to tonight, when it was here at my table, the only notice that I had about NCDOT's letters to CATS was because a reporter put them in my hand. I otherwise would have had no information that all of this occurred because CATS failed to adhere to the maintenance schedule for the trains and that this was the cause of the derailment. It is very hard to start rebuilding trust when, as I sit here today, I would only have known about that extent of the problem before today because a reporter gave me the document. That is just unacceptable. Ongoing safety issues and failing to maintain trains. Please understand that even, oh, I'm sorry, when I wrote this, I didn't have the document. It was here at the dais when I sat here tonight, so there. The fact that we could only have this conversation because someone outside of government provided proof is not acceptable. On the questions of remediation, Mr. Cagle, the derailment happened in May. What happened, what steps did CATS take in June and in July and August and September and October and November and December and January to remediate this problem? I was unclear from your comments. You said that 2 trucks have already been sent out for remediation, but I don't know that it's repairs that were made as a result of the derailment. So when I'm done, I hope you'll address that. I have heard it said on the radio today that remediation has been initiated, but I hope that's not the heat strips, which are merely diagnostic tools. They are not remediation, so I would like clarity around that. On the most important issue of whether the trains are safe, yesterday it was stated by the interim CEO in a memo to all of us that we have a corrective action plan in place to address the maintenance issues associated with the light rail vehicles. We continue to operate a safe and reliable transit system, and CATS believes the Blue Line is operating safely. However, I've got a May 2nd memo from NCDOT saying CATS is currently operating light rail vehicles which have surpassed the manufactured recommended axle overhaul thresholds. It says CATS has not conducted any form of risk assessment or hazard analysis to quantify the risks or to identify additional risks that the condition of the deferred maintenance may be causing, nor has CATS examined or presented information on potential other contributing factors and or mitigations that may exacerbate or reduce hazard risk. So as I sit here today, not having any sort of technical expertise myself, I have a very hard time reconciling what NCDOT said earlier this month and what I'm reading as of yesterday. I would like to help restore clarity for me and credibility and trust for Timothy Abbott, who is DOT's Safety Enforcement and Oversight Manager, to come to the MTC, or at least write to the MTC, and explain why the trains are safe, notwithstanding these aspects that I just read to you from his March 2nd letter. In addition, we now have today, I think the first time I've ever seen this, here at my table, a memo to the interim CEO from DOT dated March 21st, stating that CATS has failed to conduct bridge structure inspections, which I presume are bridges where CATS travels over. And so there are numerous apparent citations related to a failure to inspect bridges, which I think is news to everybody in the room. And of course, you heard the CEO reference that 30% of the bus fleet is operating over its 12-year useful life. I am glad to hear the mayor of Charlotte and the interim CEO's support. I heard it on the radio today from the mayor, and it's contained in the CEO's memo from yesterday. Support to select a third-party transit consultant to perform an operational investigation. I hope that's not management partners. That's not what I'm seeking. I'm seeking a true, fresh pair of eyes, a true third-party person who is a stranger to all these people and these events and who will bring total independence. I heard someone today lament. They approved of my calling for this, but they lamented, why do we need to hire another consultant to investigate? And I'll tell you, I have made some assertions in the last few days and tonight based upon the records and documents that I have, but I have incomplete information. CATS and its leadership have made assertions in response about safety and what has happened to get us here. But at this point, we don't know anything for a fact. So I am seeking an outside entity to interview the CATS technicians who were involved, to interview CATS executive staff who had roles in this, to interview people in the city manager's office who oversaw CATS. NCDOT can no doubt shed light, as can manufacturer Siemens, as to what was said and when. We need someone to pull the records and the emails and the documents to substantiate what has actually occurred. We need an entity that is familiar with the transit regulatory framework and best practices for transit organizations to give us context for any actual conclusions upon which we can all finally rely. I now at this time make that motion. MTC, well, you know what, I'll wait to make the motion until we can hear from the remainder of the board, but I would like to reserve some time to do that, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altman.
Okay, let me start from the end. So yes, we had not got into the discussion of other things that we've found in an environment where we are encouraging employees, recommending to employees, asking employees to come forward and break the culture of silence. We should expect that there will be other things found. One of the things that was brought forward by an employee in light of all of this was that CATS had failed in 2021 to conduct bridge inspections. That is an inspection requirement. It's a federal requirement to inspect bridges every 2 years, once every 2 years. An employee brought that forward. We immediately looked into it to understand it. We have immediately secured a contractor to conduct the maintenance in 2023. We have a schedule, not the maintenance, the inspection. We have a schedule. STV is the contractor. They are an on-call contractor to the city, and they are qualified to do this work, and they are immediately starting. They actually started yesterday. The first crew started yesterday. They will add 2 additional crews on Monday morning, and they will complete the bridge inspections, the initial inspections, in the next 2.5 to 3 months, and then they will work with us to finalize the reports. But while they are going, they will be reporting to us anything that they find so that we can immediately start to address those things as they're going and not wait for a final report. The reason you have a letter is we self-reported to FTA and NCDOT upon discovery, and we worked with them to inform them of what our actions would be. Yes, I had not got in there. That is why that letter is in your packet, all of your packets tonight, and it was certainly something to talk about. I will tell you, we believe that our parking garages are out of date for their inspections as well. We have already contacted a consultant, WSP, to immediately conduct parking garage inspections. there will be other things that we will find that we need to correct. I think that is going to be true. And we will bring those forward to you as we know what they are and as we know what our course of action is, and as we work with NCDOT if necessary on these items. You
How many,
asked-
I'm sorry, how many bridges?
Well, so we call them bridges. It's 37 elevated structures, which is a bridge or an elevated platform or other elevated structures, and 6 parking decks.
And how quickly will it take CATS to establish whether our residents are in jeopardy to cross over these places?
Yes, so during the last inspection, all bridges, all elevated structures were deemed good and fair condition. There was one urgent need identified with a retaining wall, and that was fixed on site as the inspector was conducting the inspection.
I apologize, I'm confused. You said there are 37 plus the parking decks. You're telling me all of them have now been inspected?
No,
How-
during the last inspection.
Oh, when was that?
It was 2021, 2019. All of them were deemed, all of the bridges, elevated structures were deemed fair and good condition, with exception of one retaining wall, which was fixed on site because it was identified as urgent or necessary for repairs.
And when should they have been inspected?
In 2021,
Okay, so we're 2 years past without.
correct, we have missed one
37.
cycle.
Okay.
It is 2023, and we did not inspect them in 2021, which is when they should have been inspected. Yeah. The March 2nd memo was sent back as a confirmation that NCDOT had agreed that our corrective action plans were adequate. That was on March 2nd.
I don't have the technical expertise that you do, but I read from the March 2nd letter. We all heard what I said, and none of that sounds like, I mean, should I go back and read the
On March
highlighted
2nd,
portions again?
On March 2nd, NCDOT accepted our corrective action plans.
Okay, then can you
And those
explain?
corrective action plans do not fix the issue with the bearing. Only sending them to Siemens can do that. But they do put into place mitigating measures. The other thing I will say to the question of, is the system safe? As we have worked through this with the FTA and NCDOT, at no time have they suggested that we needed to suspend service on the system. So if we believed we were not operating safely, we would not operate. But we know that this issue needs to be corrected as fast as possible. And while it exists, we need to have mitigating measures. And one of the mitigating measures that was recommended by Siemens and accepted by NCDOT are the heat strips. The heat strips, so the failure of the bearing is not something that happens quickly. A bearing doesn't go from completely okay to perfectly functional to catastrophic failure or unfunctional quickly. It takes time. The seal breaks, water enters, corrosion starts, heat builds. And so as we worked with NCDOT and Siemens, right after the accident, after the derailment on the 21st, we notified NCDOT, and CATS began a root cause analysis with Siemens. One of the things that they recommended were the heat strips. The heat tabs, quite frankly, what they are strips that are applied to the axle of the vehicle, to the axles of the vehicle, and they register temperature in 10 degrees increments. What Siemens said is anything below 150 degrees should be indicative that you are not at risk of catastrophic failure. But if you get a register above 150 degrees, you need to inspect that vehicle to determine if the bearing is starting to fail. Because in an abundance of caution, we set our inspection protocols to be 130 degrees or above. So when we do a visual inspection of the heat strips, if they have registered 130 degrees or greater, that vehicle is immediately removed from service and further evaluations of the axle and the bearing are completed. As well as each week, every vehicle that is in service the heat strips will be inspected at least once per week, and all vehicles that are removed from service and then placed back into service will always have a visual inspection of the heat tabs before returning to service. And again, if the heat tabs register at 130 degrees or greater, they will not be returned to service until further testing is done to determine that the bearing is working properly, or until the truck assembly is sent to California, to Siemens for repair or overhaul.
Well, on that score, what I would say to you is, perhaps I'm the only one in the room, but I won't feel comfortable that these trains are safe until I hear it from DOT, based upon very strong language that I see in this March 2nd letter. That may just be me, but if you will, please continue, particularly with the chronology from remediation efforts from the
Yeah.
time of the derailment to January.
So again, the derailment on the 21st occurred, immediate notification to DOT, FTA, root cause analysis began, heat strips applied, inspections began, brings us to the root cause analysis being conducted and starting to wrap up, the root cause analysis starting to be complete. It was complete in December, I believe, but I will get a final, I will need to confirm that. At the time, the root cause analysis identified the maintenance, but the bearing as the issue. Everything we've talked about with the bearing and the seal allowing water to enter the bearing. And it identified the midlife overhaul as a way to fix that.
So if I'm understanding you, sir, CATS took from May, when the derailment happened, until December to diagnose the problem, and no remediation happened in that period. Is that correct?
So separate from the root cause analysis, 2 vehicle trucks were already sent to Siemens for truck overhaul.
And were those sent because of the derailment?
They were sent because of the need to do the maintenance. And so, no, they were not sent because, they were sent before.
Right.
Before.
Okay, so 2 trucks were there, but not because of the derailment, and no trucks were, it doesn't sound, what I'm hearing
Those
is that
trucks
no
could have been.
remediation because of what caused this derailment happened from May to January or December. Is that right?
So there was additional training for the operator, for the operators and the control room to better understand that when this the warning signs of this situation, because as you mentioned, or someone mentioned, that was not properly identified that day. The heat strips were applied, working with Siemens to understand that that was a mitigating measure, and the root cause analysis was conducted. And I believe that the root cause analysis was completed in December. As we worked with NCDOT, it became clear that we needed to work with them to have additional mitigating measures. You are correct. In the first corrective action plan that we submitted after their 2-6 letter, so their 2-6 letter did not specify a specific speed restriction. It said you should consider a speed restriction. Our first corrective action plan did not include a speed restriction. On 217, they came back and were specific that we needed to consider a 35-mile-an-hour speed restriction. Now, there were some other things that they asked us to do, like to determine if by utilizing the speed restriction, would that create other safety issues? We were aware of no other safety issues that could be created by reducing speed, so we immediately did that on 218. We implemented on 217, and we had it, for lack of a better term, hardwired into our system on 218.
I think my confusion was arising by your use of the term mitigating measures. And now I think I understand. There's two kinds of mitigating measures, those that reduce risk, like the heat strips, which say, hey, this thing's about to get too hot, and those things which actually remedy the problem, meaning fix the defect. So what I'm hearing from you is that CATS took mitigating measures in the form of risk reduction with the heat strips in this period of time, but it didn't begin actually remediating the defect. It hasn't actually begun remediating the defect because you haven't sent any of these trains yet to California, is that right?
No, that is not correct.
Okay.
2 truck sets were sent. One has been received back, and the other will be received back, we believe, next week. It's en route back.
But were those sent because of the derailment?
No, but they were overhauled, which removes the faulty bearing from the truck. So there are 2 truck sets. Neither have been received or accepted yet. One has been received but not accepted. The other has not been received, that have had the faulty bearing removed and replaced. So
Yeah, I
the
know.
other truck sets, well, hold on, the other truck sets can't be sent at this time or over the last 8 months because CATS did not have the dollies to remove the truck sets. Now, I don't disagree with you that that's an issue, but that is an issue that we are immediately resolving by buying 6 additional sets of dollies and requesting a loaner set from a different transit agency. So I understand what you're saying. We have sent 2 truck sets to California, to Sacramento, to Siemens, and they are being received back. We could not send any additional sets to California because we didn't have the dollies. Now, should someone have asked the question, then all I can tell you is I definitely asked the question after learning of it, and we are moving immediately to buy additional dollies so that we can expedite it. But you are correct. Mitigating measures are intended to reduce risk as we operate, right? In operating this, so again, as we have worked with NCDOT, there has been no recommendation or suggestion to suspend operations, but we do need corrective action plans to reduce risk, to continue to operate, and we need to expedite, which we are doing, the repair of the vehicles.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Bales, any comments, questions?
I have a couple of questions. Let me just find them here. At what point did CATS notify NCDOT of the derailment?
So they followed the regulations. I believe the regulations are within 2 hours. I will get you a final answer. They notified them in the specified period. I think it's, there is a requirement to verbally notify them within 2 hours, and then there are other requirements in writing and such. But I can get you that information, but they followed the regulation. We followed the regulations.
One of the things that struck me is this derailment happened on March the 21st, and our MTC meeting was May 21st, and our MTC meeting was May 25th, within a few days, and nothing, crickets. That's shocking to me. I'm sorry, I've got my little notes all over the place as we've been going through this. So one of the questions that I have in regards to the light rail car itself, has it been pulled? were the bearings replaced or is it still in operation, I guess is my question?
That particular light rail car?
Yes.
I will need to double check. I don't believe so, but if it were back in service, so because it had a catastrophic failure of the bearing, the only way to put that truck into service again would be a full truck overhaul. I do not know if, I do not believe that that was one of the ones sent to California because of the timing, but I will double check the status of that truck. So the other thing to note, and I know this gets really confusing, light rail vehicle, 3 trucks. The trucks can and are moved between vehicles.
Right.
So, but that truck, that was a center truck. There are 3 trucks. Each end is the A and the B, and then the C truck, which is the center. That was a center truck, and so that center truck could not be returned to service until full overhaul.
Okay, so it's very clear that maintenance is overdue. Have you been able to get to the root cause of why maintenance had continually been deferred?
I have heard many reasons. I am none that have satisfied me. Yes.
You know, I've only been serving on the MTC for a little more than a year. And I came into this role optimistic that collectively as a region, we could move public transportation forward. And Commissioner Altman, I hear what you said when you talked about there being kind of 2 things here. I mean, I've been a huge advocate for an authority, and we've talked about that for over a year now. But the trust that has been broken with our residents, with our families, right? I consider those that we represent, they're our families. We've got to find a way to fix that trust. And Mr. Cagle, I don't envy the position that you're in, but I want to thank you for taking these necessary steps and being transparent with us, because that's not an easy thing to do, especially with all the cameras, et cetera, here tonight. But it's a start. It's an inch forward. I hope that we get to the bottom of a lot of this, because it's not just maintenance on the rail and on buses, but now I'm also hearing on bridge inspections and on parking garages. This is truly the whole organization. And I would like to think that those that are working within CATS will step up and will be transparent and will feel comfortable having the hard conversations and bringing out of the darkness and into the light the issues that we need to address to protect all of our families. So with that.
Thank you, Mayor Bales. Mayor Simmons?
The number 8 keeps coming up, that we're removing 8 and sending 8 at this time. And everything I read talks about expediting all of this. Where did that number 8 come from? Is that the maximum number that we can send to and still operate? Is that a number that somebody decided that's all the carts we could afford to buy? Where'd that number come from?
So as we worked through it with NCDOT, that is correct, sir. We were trying to balance the fleet needed to run the system, to run the schedule, plus the spares needed with the number we could send out. It also has to do with how quickly we could get dollies, and we can get the one spare set from the other transit agency, and Siemens is able to send us 6 new dollies almost immediately. Actually, Siemens, we are going to council on April 10th, but I had a long conversation with Siemens executives and said, look, we can't wait 5 weeks for you to build these things. Please start now. And they have already started based on a notice to proceed that we issued. And so it's both operational needs and the availability of dollies or new dollies at the, at a quick speed.
I also believe I heard you say that we're awaiting Siemens to give us a date as far as when this scheduling can be done. I would hope that on our end, at this point in time, with the past performance that we've already seen, that we would get with Siemens and request the date that we'd like to have these things done. And instead of us working around Siemens' schedule, I think it's time we be proactive and we start working around our own schedule and setting our own schedules and goals for this project.
Yes, sir, I agree. So requested, we have gone to California to sit down with their executives to say this schedule is not adequate. So we have requested, but we've strongly requested, and we have done our part to remove barriers by not being able to send enough equipment. I will tell you, and again, we are having the conversations. Sometimes I am hesitant to put out information that I don't have 100% on. I believe, based on a conversation today with Siemens, that their path forward will be to complete the truck overhauls, all fleet, by January of 2025. Now, I will confirm that, and I'm saying here, I hate to put that information out, but it is important for us to know we are doing everything to push Siemens to move that forward. And so thinking about that, July 2025, half the fleet, January 2025, all of the fleet. And as each of those vehicles, trucks, goes out and we receive them, we will go from 100% needing it to 20% to 30%, to those numbers will get better and better in our favor with the repairs as we go. And we will be working directly with NCDOT to keep them informed of the status. But that's, right now, our tentative schedule looks like January of 2025 for the whole fleet.
Okay, the only other thing I have to add is I understand part of this is culture. I buy into that. I absolutely do buy into that. But many, many times throughout this evening, we've talked about this contractor, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. So these are funds that are moving around all the time, and those should show up in the accounting process as well. So it doesn't require for somebody to come into your office and tell you that we've got a problem here. We should be able to, and I understand that you weren't in that office, so please don't think I'm pointing any fingers, but there has to be some checks and balances in place that, hey, all of a sudden, we approved the money in, I think it was 2019 or 2020 suggested earlier, but that money never got spent. So it's not all culture. We've got some other problems in the wheels here, and it's not all culture, and it's not all the fact that the employees aren't willing to come forward and talk about it. We've got some other problems that need to be addressed as well. I hope we'll address those at the same time. And as far as Commissioner Altman, when she gets ready to make her motion here shortly, she's not going to have any trouble getting a second on that motion, because I do believe that we need to have some outside eyes looking at this with people that have not dealt with this situation before. They're not involved with this situation currently, that can take a fresh look at it.
Right.
And with that, I say thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Knox, Mayor Knox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had a lot of buzzwords tonight. We've heard trust and accountability and transparency and leadership. First word that comes to mind for me is system-wide failure when it comes to preventative maintenance. My wife and I were on that blue line 2 weeks ago, and it appalls me to know that I find out a week later that we had a derailment almost a year ago, and I'm riding on that rail. That concerns me. But deferred maintenance and preventive maintenance is just an outright failure. When you have the budget to do it and you don't do it, there's a problem. there's no point in putting blame on our CEO, our COO, our CFO that are no longer here. Blame doesn't fix anything. We have to look at moving forward on how we're going to correct this. But I will tell you, the preventative maintenance end should just be a no-brainer. And I thank you, Brent, for what measures are being taken at this time. Now, addressing, I may be the senior person on this board. I've been sitting here for 6 years now. I am fortunate to be a mayor with 140 employees in my town. I am only responsible for 2 of those jobs, and that's my town manager and my town attorney. Everybody else answers to somebody else. But I, like you, go in the field. I am with my police officers at shift change. I go to the range with them. I hang out at the fire stations and eat lunch with my firefighters. I go to public works. I've worked construction before, so I know their families. I know their kids. I know what's going on. So to that end, I appreciate your leadership for getting out in the field, because at the end of the day, when someone has a problem in the town of Davidson, they know that they can confide in me and come to me. And it's not going to go any further than that, because they have a superior that they need to report it to, and I will urge them to do that. So to that end, thank you for doing that. Accountability. Chrissy, you brought that word up. The buck stops with you right now. So you got to be accountable for this, and you've got to be accountable for previous failures. So I appreciate the measures that you're taking thus far. Transparency. Lee, you said it. You just saw this tonight for the first time. A lack of transparency historically is not a good track record, and we can do better than this. And lastly, trust. It's not a matter of just trusting this board. It's a matter of the folks that are out there in TV land that are going to see this at the 11 o'clock news tonight, having trust in us that we are going to provide a good, safe, secure product for them to engage in and utilize when it comes to public transportation. And the message that is being emulated tonight is far from that. So it's good. The onus of trust is not just on you as our interim CEO. It's on all of us as well, as representatives and stewards of our community. So we're going to have to glean what we can from any information we get and carry it to the public and say, give us a second chance, because it's a black eye right now, and we don't need to have a black eye. We need to be moving forward. So to that, I'll defer to whoever's next.
I think that we are at Mayor Edwards in Pineville. Is Mayor Edwards still with us? There you go.
I am.
Yes. Do you have any comments, Mayor Edwards?
It's very disturbing, because I read all this a couple of days ago when Lee sent it out. And if this were the private sector that I came out of, heads would have already been rolling. There's got to be people in management positions that knew everything that was going on, and it was neglected for whatever reason. When budgets are approved, my God, I just can't believe it. I want to thank Lee Altman for staying on this, and it's an important issue. And Mr. Cagle, you inherited a hornet's nest, as they would say, and you have done a yeoman's job, I feel, in bringing a lot of this to light. So I don't put any of this on you at all. You have answered the questions. And the ones you couldn't answer, you said, I'll find out and I'll get you an answer. So I appreciate your honesty and your straightforwardness. But it's just disturbing that we have put passengers at risk. Even though that wasn't a total derailment, it's putting passengers at risk and continues today. And you need to get to the bottom of who, why, and where, and why people didn't come forward knowing that this stuff was not being done. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for everybody.
Thank you, Mayor Edwards. Is Mayor Washam still with us?
Mayor Lyles, this is Andrew Grant. Mayor Washam had to step aside to another meeting.
All right, Mr. Grant, we certainly would like to hear from him. Please, if you guys have thought through this, send us an email or any comments that you have. We really, really want this to be a group that has had the opportunity to discuss it. I mean, we've talked about this significantly, wanting every member to have an opportunity to ask these questions. And if you need to schedule something with Brent, that's fine as well. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we also have several other folks that ordinarily join us, and I believe I'll start with Mr. Thunberg from Morrisville. Mr. Thunberg, do you have any comments or suggestions as a result of this presentation and the conversations that you've heard so far?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you asking. I think, and this goes along with what Rusty said, I think I heard earlier in the presentation, I think I heard essentially that Mr. Cagle said that the buck stops here. And I believe him. And having listened to some of the other comments here, I think the accountability portion starts at the next meeting when he brings forward the schedules, those maintenance schedules, and shows us what's planned and what has been done, and allows, it is transparent with regards to the specifics of those things. And so, and I'm sure that he's anxious to be able to do that because certainly it shows the action and the way things have been moving forward. So, but I think Chrissy Ashland and Ms. Altman, deserve our thanks for staying on top of this and being proactive with regards to trying to point out some of these deficiencies. And so I'm not going to belabor the past, but I'm going to go ahead and look to the future. And I think we ought to continually check with Chrissy and Lee to see how we're doing. So I do want to take exception to one thing that Rusty said. I think Brian Welch and I are the ones that have been on this board the longest. I don't know, Brian, how is he there? How long have you been on there? I think it's like 12 or 13 years for me.
When I was appointed deputy manager, so 2005.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. He's the longest serving. I'm second.
Okay. Mayor Reed, any comments or thoughts that you would have for us?
Not to be redundant on the question that has been asked, I've had to hear the follow-up from the question that has been asked, so I don't want to rehash what has already been said, but I am concerned about what has taken place, but I'm even more concerned about the solutions to address the problems. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mayor Reed. It's always good to see you. Is there anyone else that I missed in the opportunity to provide comment? So as a result of this, I think one of the things that we're doing tonight is to be able to speak up and to do that with all of the media, as Mayor Bales said, and to have this honest conversation and to have it in a way that is respectful of each other has been a tremendous effort for each of you, and really, really appreciate it. But we're not done yet. And I mean that in both the long term as well as the things that we have to finish up tonight. So there are going to be additional items that we need to do. But I do want to say that we are in a situation where we are getting to trying to send out information in advance. I think we sent out packets 2 or 3 days ago. I can't remember. So look for more of those kinds of opportunities to communicate, because we only meet once a month. and sometimes that could be 6 weeks because of holidays. And so we are going to continuously try to use packages of information to go out in a way to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to review the materials of the meeting. So the next thing that I would like to say is that Commissioner Altman has suggested to put a motion on the floor. I would like for us to have that motion now and then have any discussion as it's being made. So I think that you've got a second from Mr. Simmons, so Mayor Simmons. So Ms. Altman?
Thank you. I'm fine to go forward with my motion if, Mr. Attorney, we don't need to now vote to allow us to add the action item on an agenda that was already published. Are we good to go with my making the motion?
Well, to stick with the rules of procedure, we need the, yes,
Okay.
unanimous vote to put it on as an action.
So I move to put on the agenda an action item related to the contracting with a third-party entity to investigate these measures.
Wouldn't it be best to put the motion that she wants to have on the agenda so that people know what it is? So I think
I can articulate the exact motion.
yes, I think that's what I was getting at.
Okay, I can read what the motion will be,
Yeah.
and then we have to vote to add it.
Yeah.
Because MTC's legal counsel has advised me that the MTC does not have its own budget nor contracting authority to hire a consultant, and because the expense must flow through the city, my motion will be to move that the MTC adopt a resolution requesting that a third-party transit consultant perform an operational investigation to establish facts related to the trail derailment, specifically, the bridge impairment, the failure to order buses in a timely manner, and any and other issues related to the bus and rail operations, safety, security, and asset maintenance. I further request that the resolution provide that an RFP for this work go out on an expedited basis and the consultant report back to the MTC on an expedited basis.
Second.
All right, we have a second.
Now
We're in,
motion to add that to the agenda, correct?
yes, that's where we are.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Any discussion on the motion?
Now she makes the motion, correct?
Well, we need to vote.
No, we have to vote. We have to vote, and so,
And this is to put it on the
The
agenda.
on the agenda. And I'm worried about our quorum. Do we have a quorum? Okay, so the vote is, if there's no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Okay, and we have a quorum.
Okay.
And it's unanimous. Okay, with that, we will now move to a discussion of that resolution, since it's now been placed on the agenda. I won't ask you to read it again, but we can go ahead. Is there any discussion regarding the motion? So one of the things that I want to ask, is there any reaction to this, anything that people would like to have a question about? Okay, and the thing that I am a little bit, want to make sure that I'm correct in this. The city council would have to approve from the CAT's budget. So what we're doing is a resolution that will require an action of the city council. Am I right, Brad? I'm just making sure. And in that situation, one of the things that I would hope that we do is actually provide the minutes of this meeting to all of the city council members so that they can hear what was being discussed and acknowledge that. Because I think if we're going to go out and look for a consultant, we want the consultant to be razor sharp in what we want them to accomplish. And I think this meeting has been very helpful in defining a number of those ideas, concepts, concerns. You know, how do we deal with things like this when that happens in an organization? And so I hope that what we would see is that the city council would have the opportunity to develop a list of folks that might do this work, as well as the scope of the work based upon the conversations tonight, and be able to bring that back or send it out to the MTC members so that we are all aligned, so that we make this work really, and if we're going to expedite things, we need to make sure that we're aligned and providing that information between both of the organizations.
May I be heard on that?
Yes?
Oh, thank you. Of course, city has different procedures, and I'm not familiar with many of them. I know that in the county, the manager has authority to send out an RFP, that she doesn't always have to go to the full board in order to send out an RFP. And I'm wondering, is that not the case with the city? Only because I am trying to expedite this. And I think this board certainly has the right to want to have this. And so, I would like for us to be able to move forward without having to do more. But my question to you, sir, would be, do all your RFPs have to go to city council for approval?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Altman. I'm not exactly sure how this will work. I'd like to rely back on legal help to see how this should happen.
Yeah, so my understanding of it would be is that it would depend on the value. And so I think it is possible for that to move forward without an actual council approval, but it would depend on the value.
Okay, then I respectfully submit that if we can find out what the value is, and that if we can move forward without having to go through more machinations to expedite this, that would be in the best interest of the safety of our residents. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're going to now vote on the action to have a outside transit consultant expedited with the scope of services to review the areas of safety and maintenance and all things transit that we have and discussed tonight. So all in favor of that motion, please raise your hands. All right, I think that's unanimous. All right, so thank you for the open discussion. I know it is late, and if those of you that want to stay, feel free to do so. But we do have to have a few other items on our agenda tonight, and let me go back to those. We've had our report and openness there, and now we need to address the issues around our budget, or the budget that we would submit to the Charlotte City Council for approval. All right, who's going to present the budget? There we go. Thank you so much. Let's go get started on it. While we're waiting for that to pull up, I just want to remind that MTC members, you were all emailed informational items, would have the numbers about ridership, the safety and security contracts that are coming up, battery electric buses, mid-pallet update, and so all of this is on the website, but you should have these as copies.
Good evening, Chairwoman Lyles and Commission members. My name is Chad Howell. I'm the interim CFO. This evening, I will be presenting an updated FY24 and FY24 to FY28 CIP. And what I've tried to do from our previous meeting is also incorporate in my presentation any questions that I got from either this group or either one of our other advisory groups. As we go through tonight, and you'll see it here with the discussion and also on the next slide where we talk about the CEO focus areas, there's going to be some common themes between this budget presentation and our previous meeting. The CEO's focus areas are a structurally balanced budget, which we have, safety and security, value of employees, maintenance and asset preservation. And again, we discussed those previously, and you will see that as we go through the presentation. Now I'm going to move on to the preliminary revenue projections. So in my years of doing this, the way I always think of a budget is two sides of a coin. So side one is your revenues and side two is your expenses. So I'm going to start with side one, which are our revenues, our operating revenues. Operating revenues for FY 2024 are going to be approximately $249 million, which is a $6 million increase over FY 23. And a little bit more of the breakdown here. About 60% of our operating revenues come from the half-cent sales tax, or about $148 million. 18%, or about $43 million, comes from various state or federal grants that are brought over into the operating fund. And about 12% comes from the city's maintenance of way. 7% come from passenger fares. And I will point this out now and later. We are also not recommending any fare increases as part of our FY24 budget. This just provides a little additional information on our half-cent sales tax. Again, we work closely with the city's dedicated full-time economist, and in doing so, we're recommending we're projecting that sales taxes for FY24 will be approximately $11 million than those budgeted in FY23. Now, if you look at the chart, you may say, why are you budgeting less than you're projected to recover in 23? Well, part of that is, according to our economists and according to things I think we're all seeing in the news, there's still a chance that we could have an economic downturn sometime within this fiscal year. And so we are being conservative there. We're trying to make sure that we project it appropriately. We are also, one thing you see here, the red line is our trend line. We're also, and that's monies that we kind of hold back or put into a revenue reserve fund. We are also working with city staff and looking at that to see if how we may incorporate that better into our operating budget. I had this slide last time, and I think what I'll say about this slide is, while we have seen some ridership return, it's still not back to pre-pandemic levels, but we did use these projections as we crafted the FY24 budget. We did take these projected increases or projected adjustments to ridership into consideration. Now I'll move on to the other side of the coin, which is the expense side. Again, structurally balanced budget. No surprise to anyone here, the budgets, they balance. So we have operating expenses of $249 million, which again is a 6% increase over FY23. A couple things I'll point out here. You may look at the 23 budget and look at the 24 budget at the personal services and say, well, why are personal services going down? Personal services are going down here because what we've done in order to prioritize the other operating expenses is incorporate savings from our vacancy rate. No matter how hard we try, and we have an excellent HR staff, we have an excellent recruitment staff, we're never 100% staffed. There's always some lag between when an employee leaves and we're able to bring those in. We've looked back at that for several years now, and we have a consistent amount of dollar amount and positions, but more a dollar amount of where we typically have some personal services savings there. And so one of the ways we can do that is build in a vacancy rate. It's not a hiring freeze. It's not a hiring slowdown. We're wide open and recruiting for positions, and we'll remain that way unless something else happens. But what it does allow us to do is use some of that money as part of the other operating expenses here, which is represented in an increase from $80 million to $90 million between 23 and 24. This is just a little bit different way of looking at the budget. So same $249 million. But what I want to point out here is the green and the light blue and the orange that's up about halfway up the right-hand side there. Those are, and you've heard this mentioned earlier. So that's our bus, rail, and facilities budget. So that's all in. So this includes personal services. It includes operating. But I want to point out that of CATS, approximately 66% of our total budget is devoted to those three units, or about 164 of the $249 million. I touched on the slide a little bit last time, and a couple questions came at me from it. So let me answer the questions first. Yes, we still do have a fuel hedging contract or a fuel contract in place that is currently in place through June of this year, and that helps us balance out some of the changes in really the daily diesel fuel rate. The intent is we are evaluating, and the intent is to enter into discussions and look at extending that contract for either 12 or 18 months, whichever is best at the time, best for us at the time that we go to extend it. And we have folks who's, I have a gentleman that works for me now and has been in CATS since before, when I was here before, who looks at this on a daily basis and can make a great recommendation about when we should extend. If we're able to extend it at a good time, I believe the 298 will have a better per gallon rate than that. So fingers crossed that we can do that, and I believe that we will be able to. I just simply include this slide, and I'll move quickly, because what it shows is, just like with each of us, when your CPI is up, because consumer price index is up, it costs us more money just to operate. So you'll see within some of the numbers there is increases that just go with it costs more to do money. It costs more to do business now than it did a year ago. So enhancements, and I'll spend a little bit of time here. So this is a new slide. We didn't present this before because we were still pulling a lot of this information together. And I'd like to take a moment here and say, but not for the collaboration of many people who are sitting in this room and many people who are not sitting here, we could not have developed this slide. So this is truly a collaborative effort, and I am proud and thankful for the assistance that I've got pulling this together. So these, again, we've kind of grouped our enhancements here. So there's more than just 3 enhancements. There's a number of enhancements, but we've grouped them into the CEO's focus areas. So within safety and security, we're looking at additional funding to expand our security contract. I believe in the previous presentation, you saw about $3.5 million in '24. There'll be another $3.5 million on top of that in '25. So a total of about $7 million more dollars devoted to safety and security. And so briefly what this does is it's going to provide security services through 2 contracts, not one. One will be one with police and armed guards, and one with our unarmed guards. The unarmed guard contract will double the number of guards currently available to protect facilities and patrol the blue and gold lines in FY24. And again, this is from feedback that our safety and security team had, and they have been the ones that have been leading the charge on getting this contract in place. What also goes with that is for example, is de-escalation training for bus drivers. So if someone comes onto the bus and they maybe don't have the fare, how do you handle that, right? So we ensure that our bus operators continuously receive those types of training, and other staff as well, customer service staff, other staff that are forward-facing. Valuing employees. One of the things here that CATS is doing that other city departments already do and have had great success at is setting up what we're calling an e-service academy. And basically it's apprenticeship and internship program. There will be some full-time staff assigned to it to make sure that it functions well. And it's an opportunity to bring in 14 apprentices and 10 interns and train them on the bus and rail side in hard to fill jobs. And so we're going to bring them in, we're going to train them, and we hope they stay with us. It's not a requirement that they stay with us, but we hope that they stay with us. The other thing we're doing here is a rate and compensation study, which would continue the efforts that we already have to retain the workforce that we have. Again, we have some very specialized positions, and it would be great if we can retain those folks on board. We're also looking at right-sizing overall the workforce. Do we need some more specialist-type positions? And one I'll point out here is, and it was referenced earlier, is an asset manager, right? We're looking at standing up a more robust facilities and asset management program that will support some of the plans and policies and procedures we already have in place. And so this is some of the workforce that can help with that. Maintenance and asset preservation. So we've talked a lot tonight about maintenance. Well, this is a piece of where that comes into reality. And I'll touch on it here and at a later part of the conversation, in a later part of the presentation. For bus, just maintenance, we're adding an additional $1 million to make a total of $10 million that will be devoted to bus maintenance in our operating budget next year. On the rail operating side, we're adding $10 million, which will make a $24.2 million total rail maintenance budget, again, just on the operating side. I'll touch capital side shortly. We've also built in about $1 million, about a $750,000 increase for facilities maintenance as well. Debt service budget is consistent with what we've projected in prior presentations. It is tied back to our financial plan, and it is consistent with our debt requirements from city finance on outstanding debt. I'd like to talk about our capital improvement plan now. Again, kind of two sides of the coin. I'm going to start this time with expenditures. And so the other thing we're really focusing on this year is using some of the reserve funds that we have built up over the years to look at getting our bus fleet back under that average bus fleet age as close to 12 years as we can. Initially, we had planned to buy 17 replacement buses. We will now buy 37. Initially, we had planned to buy 13 STS, or special transportation buses. We will now buy 19. There's also funds budgeted for numerous transit planning projects. Some of them are mentioned here. A couple I also want to talk about that came up again in some of the questions to me during previous presentations is platform extensions. So we have $2.1 million for platform extensions here. I believe it's specifically 2 extensions along the blue line, but I stand ready to be corrected if I missed that exact platforms. But we have 2.1 million. And benches and shelters is another area. So in previous years, so if you take 23 and go backward, is what previous years, so it's more than 1 year back, we've budgeted about $1.4 million for buses and shelters. And not all of that has been spent. So there's some money remaining in prior year monies. To that, we are adding $500,000 in each of these fiscal years. So we're creating continuing a true program. There'll be annual funding for it of $500,000. So $500,000 new money each year for benches and shelters. I mentioned maintenance earlier. So maintenance occurs, there's a couple of different ways to look at maintenance. You have the small everyday maintenance. Think of your car, you're replacing some small part of it. And maybe at some point you replace the entire engine of your car. Well, that's going to extend the life of your car. And so the smaller type maintenance typically is on the operating side, and the larger maintenance is typically on the capital side because it takes numerous years to get there. Specifically, we have budgeted the next year, the next payment, or the next year's budget of the LRV midlife overhaul within the capital program. And that's about $13.6 million. And that's just for the midlife overhaul piece, so not for the other truck pieces and things that Mr. Cagle explained earlier. What I'd like to point out, though, when taken in totality, so for our light rail vehicles, we are budgeting either on the operating side or on the capital side, a total of $37.8 million in FY24 to get those vehicles, to maintain and keep those vehicles where the maintenance should be. And again, that's going to take multiple years to do, and so you will see similar type, I won't say it'd be similar exact numbers, but you'll see a similar type of breakdown going into the future years as we move into 25, 26, 27, and so on. The total 5-year CIP is going to be approximately $249 million right now, but we are looking at, particularly at years 25, 26, and 27 to see if some of those may need to come up. But again, as you're aware, the city will adopt the 24 CIP, and then we will revisit 25, what will be through 29 next year. So it is a rolling 5-year CIP. Other side of the coin again, here are the sources of funds. You heard Mr. Cagle talk about reserves earlier. We will be spending some of our reserves this year to buy buses and to perform some of the other things that we need to do on the capital side. We're looking at that as a 1-year item at this point. Ideally, what we're planning and looking into and working with our partners in city finance to do is look at some type of longer-term financing plan. So that we could potentially, and this has not been cleared with the city CFO or anything like that. So, but I'm going to enter into discussions with her and her staff about what a longer-term debt issuance program might look like to bring some of these numbers up and continue the higher level of bus purchases and some of the other maintenance projects that we may have. Thank you, Chairwoman Lyles and commission members for your time this evening, and I stand ready for any questions you may have.
All right, Rusty, yes.
I just got one quick question. The $27 million for buses and the $10 million for projects and equipment purchases, is that in excess of our $130 million in reserves? I noticed it comes from reserves, but is that in excess too?
Yes, sir, it is.
Part of,
It
okay.
is in excess of the $130 million requirement across our two separate funds.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing I will say, we still have, and so, yes, it is in excess of the 130. We'll never go below that, but we also still, as I mentioned before, have some COVID cash, so to speak.
All right.
Jared, you had a question?
Yes, so I wanted to, so just a couple, there's a question, also a comment. So one is going back to the bus shelters and amenities. So, so what was the dollar figure you said per year for that one?
Yes, sir. The prior year, prior to tonight, so 23 back, we've budgeted, according to our books, about $1.4 million has been budgeted in prior year to date. So that's a budget number. And then going forward each year would be an additional $500,000 annually added to that. Of course, we'll be spending it down as we go.
Okay, so that, first of all, I will say that is a good thing to be able to add money into that, because we've heard from our last MTC meetings, we have a number of areas both within Charlotte, as well as areas such as Cornelius and other areas where they've created certain infrastructure to be able to have certain amenities and shelters and everything. It just hadn't been built. So I think that is a good thing that additional money is put in there. Is I think the next step is making sure that those are actually implemented. So that's good. So my next question is in regards to the kind of the hiring and personnel portion. So obviously, we know that as far as our current hiring, as far as from a bus operator perspective, a lot of that hiring is for the current ridership levels. But I would like to know, as far as dollar figures, as far as potential hiring bill to, as far as our pre-August 2022 levels of service, because part of being able to help bring some of that service back, even if it is a bit of a trickling faucet method, is being able to be aggressive within those hiring practices and making sure that we're hiring not just for the levels that we presently have, but also for the levels that we used to have, as well as potential hiring for potential growth or within certain particular key lines or lines that may kind of cover very long stretches of areas of the area.
Chad, let me grab this one real
Yes,
quick.
sir.
So a couple of things. The slide that showed, could we go back to that slide? Because I think you did a great job explaining it, Chad, but I want to add something in here and then
Slide 9.
probably come back to more of the sentiment. The slide that showed the breakdown between personal services and other O&M. Okay, this is it. So this is a little bit of an optical illusion. The numbers are correct, but there's two different philosophies about how to budget for personnel. One would be to budget every full-time equivalent position available at 100%. And the other is to budget for what you believe your staffing is going to be over the year. And every organization has vacancies. And so we call it sort of salary savings, right? And when you budget as if you were 100% occupied or filled, you end up putting more money into personal services that you will not spend because literally there's no one there to pay. And so it's a philosophy, it's not wrong or right, but as we looked at it, we were shortchanging ourselves on O&M by overstating personal services, so we changed that. So you can see the total budget grows. It looks like all of a sudden personal services is going down, like are we cutting positions? We are not. We are not at all. What we are doing is recognizing the salary savings that we have. Now, to the position question, and let me answer. When we talk about bus operators, you do not see bus operators in personal services because they're contracted with our ATP Dev. So they are employees, but not City of Charlotte employees. They're contractors or they're contracted. They do carry vacancies right now. It is a high amount of vacancies. And we are having conversations with them on how we can stem the tide, how we can start to turn the tide. But I will say one of the first things we need to do is stop the losses, right? Stop losing people. So we are very focused on retention, and then we're turning our focus to recruitment. But today, we need to retain every employee, whether it's bus operators, rail operators, everyone. We need to stop losing employees. And so we're really hitting hard retention. And then we will start to roll out strategies on recruitment. But I am very worried about it. Today, when we talk about service levels, when we're able to provide service, there's kind of two key ingredients there: staff and equipment. When it comes to bus, we have the staff to provide the service we are providing today. Anything beyond that, and we will start to suffer on reliability. We do not have the personnel to start to move up from the schedule we have today, but we are showing that we can provide the schedule we have today reliably. On light rail, same end result, but equipment is the issue. And so we are committed to reliable, safe service, but the service we provide today is really where we need to be so we can continue being reliable into the future. But as those things change, we certainly will discuss more with the MTC, both demand, ridership demand, and how we see that recovering and changing, and then what our strategies can be as we start to be in a better position to address this.
So does clear up some things to a certain degree, because obviously some of those were questions I kind of had even from our last TSEC meeting. So from a rail perspective, that obviously makes sense. Obviously, if we're having these speed limit changes, obviously it's important to, or if we were to add service and everything there, that if we were to add frequency, that would create a potential problem. So obviously there's no debate there because safety is first. From a bus operator's perspective, so obviously, yes, retention is important, and I would definitely strongly encourage that you could continue going with ensuring that you are able to return who you currently have, and making sure and be able to really have a very hard evaluation on retention efforts, making sure that, and then being able to really strategize on. One is what is going right, what is not going right, what is kind of creating some of the these retention issues, and then be able to kind of really take those as lessons for the future. So I would just more say that too, just making sure that understanding that there are many people of the public and ridership who do wish some of that frequency to come back, But obviously, we do recognize that retention is very important, so I would definitely just strongly encourage to keep going with that, but also being very hard on retention and making sure that, and then having continued conversation on the eventual hiring of it, so.
So, any other comments? I do want to say that I just got a book called Next, and it's like Next, What's Going to Happen in the Workforce. It's written by this professor at Yale. I would recommend it because I think this is going to get harder and harder and harder over the next several years to actually be at a place where people are definitely changing, and this book has actually done a lot of data management around that and where people are and what they're doing. And then the second thing that I would say about the budget, I'm really glad that we're doing this at this level of information, but I think for me, as we're going through this process of change and openness and crisis, I really think that one of the things that has resonated with me is the connection between our budget and our policy making. City Council does budget, MTC does policy making. That can't be, I mean, if you're going to implement policies, you have to have financing to back them up. And I really would hope that as we're going through this, let's kind of think through that and see how we either decide to keep it or what are the opportunities for improvements in that communication. I think that's something that I am very concerned about, because as we're establishing these metrics of how we're going to do equipment changes and people, a lot of that comes under budget. But if you have a policy to grow your system and to get back where we want it to be, then that is a decision that doesn't always translate into a budget cost or something like that. And then I think the other thing that I think is really important is to watch our debt service, because you want to have the right amount of reserves, but you don't want to have too much. And I think you guys have done a great job allocating funding to the needs that we have to make this work better. And so I want to say good job on the budget, and let's just keep working to build out the right system that we can have. Ms. Mayor Bales?
Yeah, one of the things that you and I have had conversations around when we're talking budget and policy is the potential opportunity to have some joint meetings to make sure that we are on the same page. That would be one of my recommendations.
I would agree.
I have a question.
And I think we might have to figure that out as a committee meeting maybe, but you know how that goes. But we'll just keep working at it, so, all right. Commissioner Altman?
Thank you, ma'am. This is a really interesting point you've just made, and I will call upon our attorney again, because I was trying to get this down to a single sentence to explain to residents, and I was asking our attorney earlier this week to drill down the exact difference between the jurisdiction between the MTC and City Council. And what I understood our conversation to leave me with is that basically the two boards have concurrent authority over policy. It's just that City Council has the additional authority to enter into contracts for CATs and to buy land, which the MTC does not have those two rights. So can you clarify for me, because I thought we did have concurrent policy jurisdiction. Is there ever a time when we vote on a policy that the City Council wouldn't, or vice versa, just so for my edification?
Yeah, sure. I think there is a lot of overlap. For instance, when CATS brings transit plans to the MTC, such as the Silver Line or other long-term transit plans, those things are voted on by MTC, and they're also voted on, they're part of a city plan as well. So definitely there is overlap in a lot of those areas.
Has there ever been a time when one voted for something and the other didn't, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
So it's been sort of a concurrent thing with both policies, with both boards?
From my experience,
Thank you.
It has been a negotiation. That it's not that it hasn't been that we agreed, it's just that we've negotiated where we want to get to be. And that may not be a bad thing, but if we're going to talk about speed and change, let's get some idea of what we're doing and how long it takes, and just pay attention to it and see if there are any opportunities. Maybe a joint meeting is the opportunity to say, this is the way we want to do it. Or there may be some smaller things that we do, like, well, why do we have to put that on the consent agenda for something that the city has to approve? I think that when I look at it, it's really one of those opportunities to have this board actually engaged in finance and connecting these things together. So, all right, so I think that if I have crossed off every item on this agenda, I'd like to have your feedback, though. When we started this agenda, we had the regular agenda with, let's do this first, second, and third that we've always had. But I wonder if you would feel comfortable and, drop me a note or say, is it possible to put priority items on the top of the list so that people can really engage in that discussion, and then have some kind of consent documents that you can have and say, I have a question about this. For example, if you want to know more about the battery electric buses mid-pilot update, while we have you a memo, you could say, I want to talk more about that. But I think it's important that we provide to the citizens before 8 o'clock the opportunity to hear the most important things that we're talking about. But I'd love to have that feedback from you on what we're doing and how we do it. So with that, unless there are any other comments, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
And a second, and I don't think I have to call all in favor. We're probably all ready. Thank you very much, everyone.